Growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business wasn't easy for someone like me. I always felt a little different, a little out of place, like I was hiding a part of myself that I couldn't quite understand. My name is Alex, and this is the story of how my life changed when my best friend, the definitively straight and impossibly charming Ryan, asked me to teach him about guys, and then surprised us both by kissing me first. Ryan and I met during our sophomore year of college. We were assigned as lab partners in organic chemistry, a class we both struggled with but somehow managed to pass by spending countless late nights studying together. He was everything I wasn't: confident, athletic, and seemingly effortless in the way he moved through life. With his tousled brown hair that always looked perfectly messy and those hazel eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed, it was hard not to notice him. But I tried my best to keep my feelings in check. After all, Ryan was straight, and I wasn't looking to complicate my life with unrequited feelings. Our friendship grew naturally over shared coffees, study sessions, and eventually weekend hangouts. We discovered mutual interests in obscure indie bands, hiking trails that tourists didn't know about, and a shared obsession with true crime documentaries. Ryan would often crash on my couch after late-night movie marathons, and I'd pretend not to notice how my heart raced when he'd sleepily smile at me the next morning. Let me explain why this friendship mattered so much to me. Growing up, I never had many close male friends. I always felt like there was an invisible barrier between me and other guys, something I couldn't quite cross. With Ryan, that barrier didn't exist. He was comfortable with physical affection in a way most straight guys weren't, throwing an arm around my shoulders, giving me bear hugs when we hadn't seen each other for a while, or falling asleep with his head on my shoulder during movie nights. It felt natural, uncomplicated. Or at least, it should have been uncomplicated. The truth was, I had been harboring feelings for Ryan for months. I'd catch myself staring at him when he wasn't looking, memorizing the pattern of freckles across his nose, or the way his voice got deeper when he was tired. I'd find excuses to touch him, fixing his collar, brushing lint off his shoulder, things friends might do, but with intentions that weren't entirely friendly. I kept these feelings locked away, convinced that acknowledging them would ruin the most important friendship in my life. Our friend group expanded over time to include Ryan's teammates from the soccer team and my friends from the campus LGBTQ+ alliance. It created an interesting dynamic, these two worlds colliding, but somehow it worked. We'd all go out together on weekends, a mismatched group that somehow fit perfectly. I noticed Ryan becoming more comfortable asking questions about gay culture, dating apps, and the experiences of our LGBTQ+ friends. At first, I thought he was just being a good ally, educating himself to better support his friends. I had no idea these questions were leading somewhere much more personal. The night everything changed started like any other. It was a Friday in late October, the kind where the air is crisp but not yet bitter with winter. Most of our friends had gone to a party across campus, but Ryan and I decided to skip it. He claimed he was tired from soccer practice, and I had an essay due Monday that I'd barely started. So we ended up at my apartment, ordering pizza and scrolling through streaming services to find something we hadn't already watched. We settled on some forgettable action movie, the kind with explosions that were too loud and dialogue that was too quiet. Halfway through, Ryan turned to me, his expression unusually serious in the blue light of the television. "Can I ask you something?" he said, his voice hesitant in a way that immediately made me nervous. "Sure," I replied, trying to sound casual while my mind raced through all the possible questions he might ask, none of them good. "I want you to teach me about guys," he said, the words tumbling out quickly as if he'd been holding them back for a while. I remember laughing nervously, not understanding what he meant. "What do you mean? You are a guy? You probably know more about guys than I do." Ryan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when he was stressed about exams or fights with his parents. "No, I mean," he paused, searching for words. "I want you to teach me about being with guys. Like, romantically." The room suddenly felt too small, too hot. I struggled to process what he was saying. Was this some kind of joke? A social experiment? Or worse, was he making fun of me? "I don't understand," I said carefully. "You're straight." Ryan looked down at his hands. "I thought so too. But lately, I've been questioning things. Feeling things I didn't expect to feel." He looked up at me then, his eyes vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. "For you specifically." Time seemed to stop. All the background noise, the movie, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sounds of campus life outside my window, faded away until all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. For me, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan nodded, a small, uncertain movement. I don't know what it means. I've never felt this way about a guy before. But I can't stop thinking about you. And I thought maybe if you could help me understand. I want to pause here and explain just how surreal this moment felt. For years, I had carefully constructed boundaries around my feelings, convinced that crossing them would mean losing Ryan's friendship. And now here he was, dismantling those boundaries himself, asking me for something I never thought possible. What exactly do you want me to teach you? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Ryan shifted closer to me on the couch, our knees now touching. I don't know. How to know if what I'm feeling is real. What it's like to be with another guy. He laughed nervously. This sounded less awkward in my head. I smiled despite my racing thoughts. It's not awkward. It's just unexpected. I took a deep breath. Look, questioning your sexuality is normal. Lots of people go through it. But I don't want to be an experiment for you to figure things out. That's not what this is, Ryan said quickly. You're not an experiment, Alex. You're my best friend, and these feelings I have, they're confusing, but they're real. We sat in silence for a moment, the forgotten movie still playing in the background. I was trying to process everything, to find the right words to say. But before I could speak, Ryan leaned forward. Maybe I should just. He started, and then he was kissing me. His lips were soft against mine, hesitant at first, and then more confident. I was too shocked to respond immediately, my brain struggling to catch up with what was happening. Ryan was kissing me. Ryan, who I'd been secretly in love with for months, was actually kissing me. When my brain finally started working again, I kissed him back. It was gentle and uncertain, both of us navigating unfamiliar territory. His hand came up to rest on my cheek, and I could feel the slight tremor in his fingers. When we finally pulled apart, his eyes were wide, searching mine for a reaction. Was that okay? He asked, his voice hoarse. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. In that moment, I realized I had been imagining this scenario in countless daydreams. But the reality was so much more complex than my fantasies had allowed for. Because now we had to deal with what this meant. I've been wanting to do that for weeks, Ryan admitted, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I just didn't know how to tell you. So you asked me to teach you about guys instead? I couldn't help but laugh. He shrugged, looking embarrassed. It seemed like a good opening at the time. We talked for hours that night, the movie long forgotten. Ryan told me about how he'd started noticing his feelings changing, how he'd catch himself looking at me differently, thinking about me constantly. He described the confusion he felt, the questioning of his identity that had kept him up at night. And I shared my own journey, how I'd known I was gay since high school, but had struggled to accept it, how falling for him had been both wonderful and painful, because I never thought anything could come of it. The kiss changed everything and nothing at the same time. We were still Ryan and Alex, still best friends who loved the same music and movies, who could talk for hours about nothing important. But now there was this new dimension to our relationship, unexplored territory that felt both exciting and terrifying. The days following that night were a strange mix of familiar and new. We still hung out with our friends, still went to classes and soccer games and movie nights. But there were stolen glances across rooms, fingers brushing together when we walked side by side, texts that made me blush when I read them in public. We hadn't defined what we were to each other yet, taking things slowly as Ryan navigated his newly discovered feelings. Our friends noticed the change almost immediately. My roommate, Jamie, cornered me in the kitchen one morning and demanded to know what was going on between Ryan and me. You two are acting weird, he said, narrowing his eyes. Like, good weird, but definitely weird. I wasn't sure what to say. It wasn't my place to out Ryan before he was ready, but I also didn't want to lie to my friends. We're figuring some things out, I said vaguely. Jamie raised an eyebrow. About time, he said, and went back to making his coffee. Ryan was having his own conversations with his soccer teammates. He told me about them later, how nervous he'd been to broach the subject of his sexuality with guys who had only ever known him as straight. I didn't tell them everything, he said, just that I might not be as straight as I thought. How did they take it? I asked, worried for him. Sports teams weren't always the most accepting environments. To my surprise, Ryan smiled. Better than I expected. Mike asked if this meant I'd finally stop talking about you all the time, because apparently that was getting annoying. You talk about me all the time? I couldn't help but feel pleased. Ryan rolled his eyes. Don't let it go to your head. But not all reactions were positive. Ryan's ex-girlfriend, Megan, whom he'd dated for most of freshman year, spread rumors that he was just going through a phase, that he was using me to get attention. It hurt to hear these things, to see the doubt they created in Ryan's eyes. What if she's right? He asked me one night as we lay on my bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck to my ceiling in a moment of freshman year homesickness. What if this is just a phase? I turned to look at him, taking in the profile I'd memorized months ago. Then it's a phase, I said simply. And when it's over, we'll figure that out too. He turned to face me, our noses almost touching. But I don't want to hurt you. I'm a big boy, Ryan. I can handle it. I tried to sound more confident than I felt. The truth was, the thought of this being temporary terrified me. But I also knew that forcing Ryan to define himself before he was ready would only lead to resentment. I don't think it's a phase, he said quietly. When I'm with you, everything feels right in a way it never has before. It's scary, but it's also the most certain I've ever been about anything. We kissed again then, and it felt different from that first night, less hesitant, more certain. Like we were both starting to believe that this could be real. The weeks that followed were a roller coaster of emotions. We had our first real date, a nervous affair at a restaurant off campus where Ryan kept checking to see if anyone we knew was around. We had our first fight when I accused him of being ashamed of me, and he stormed out only to return an hour later with a handwritten apology and tears in his eyes. We navigated the physical aspects of our relationship slowly, Ryan always asking questions, always making sure we were on the same page. Is this okay? He'd ask, his hands hovering uncertainly. Yes, I'd say, guiding him. More than okay. And through it all, we talked. About everything. About our fears and hopes. About what this meant for our futures. About how to tell our families. Ryan was especially worried about his parents. Conservative people who had always expected a certain life for their son. One that didn't include falling in love with his male best friend. They might not understand at first, I told him, thinking of my own coming-out experience. But if they love you, they'll try. Ryan nodded, but I could see the worry in his eyes. And if they don't, then you have me, I said. And Jamie, and Mike, and all our friends. Family isn't just the people you're related to. It wasn't all serious conversations and emotional revelations. There were moments of pure joy too, like when Ryan surprised me by showing up at the LGBTQ+ Alliance meeting I helped organize, sitting in the back with a nervous smile, but staying for the entire discussion. Or when we went to our first party as a couple, and he held my hand the entire night, not caring who saw or what they thought. One of my favorite memories is from a rainy Sunday afternoon about 2 months after that first kiss. We were in my apartment, music playing softly in the background, Ryan attempting to teach me how to cook something more complicated than pasta. I was failing miserably, more interested in distracting him with kisses than learning proper knife techniques. You're hopeless, he laughed, taking the knife from my hand before I could do any damage. I have other talents, I protested. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Like what? I thought for a moment, then grabbed his hand and pulled him away from the cutting board. Like dancing, I said, placing his hands on my waist and swaying to the music. Ryan laughed but followed my lead, pulling me closer until we were barely moving, just holding each other in the middle of my tiny kitchen with half-chopped vegetables forgotten on the counter. I love you, he said suddenly, the words hanging in the air between us. I froze, searching his face for any sign of doubt or hesitation. There was none, just Ryan, looking at me with those hazel eyes, waiting for my response. I love you too, I said, the words feeling both monumental and completely natural. I have for a long time. He smiled, that perfect, crooked smile that had first caught my attention years ago. I know, he said. I think I always knew, even before I understood my own feelings. That night, as we lay tangled together in my bed, I thought about the journey we'd been on, from lab partners to friends to something much more significant. It hadn't been easy, and we still had challenges ahead, telling our families, navigating a world that wouldn't always understand or accept our relationship, figuring out our futures together. But in that moment, with Ryan's steady breathing beside me, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. It's been almost a year since that night Ryan asked me to teach him about guys, and then surprised us both by making the first move. We've had our ups and downs, moments of doubt and moments of absolute certainty. Ryan came out to his parents over Christmas break, a tense conversation that ended with his mother hugging him tightly and his father asking for time to process, but promising his love was unconditional. We moved in together this semester, a small apartment off campus that's becoming more like home every day. And as for that teaching moment Ryan initially asked for, it turns out we've been teaching each other all along. He's taught me about courage and vulnerability, about taking risks even when you're scared. And maybe I've taught him a thing or two about understanding himself, about embracing all the parts of his identity without fear. Love stories don't always follow the path we expect. Sometimes they take detours and unexpected turns. Sometimes the person you fall for isn't who you imagined. And sometimes the journey to being together is complicated and messy. But that doesn't make the destination any less beautiful. Ryan and I are still writing our story, still figuring things out day by day. But I know now that the best love stories aren't the perfect fairy tale romances. They're the real ones, with all their complications and uncertainties. They're about two people choosing each other every day, learning and growing together, creating something beautiful out of unexpected beginnings. So if you're out there wondering if your own unexpected feelings are valid, if that friendship might be something more, if that kiss might be worth the risk, I hope our story gives you courage. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories start with a simple request, teach me about guys. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they lead to a first kiss that changes everything. Total_char_count, 18,881.